Between 1940 and 1954, the British government controlled what every person in the country ate. No suggestions, not guidelines. Controlled by ration book, by weekly coupon, by registered shop, and by law. Across the Atlantic, America joined the same system from 1942. What grandmothers cooked during those years, the actual dishes that appeared on actual tables, tells a story about human ingenuity under pressure that no recipe book has ever properly captured. September 1939. War begins, and Britain's kitchens start bracing. Nobody talks about Petrol. Everyone remembers the food, but the real warning shot came months before a single ration book appeared in anyone's hands. When Britain entered the war in September 1939, the very first commodity the government locked down was not bread, not butter, not sugar. It was petrol, controlled from September 22, 1939, according to food historian Sarah Sunden's verified research. Delivery trucks started running shorter routes almost overnight, and the smartest women were already reorganizing how they shopped before any official food announcement landed. What do I want this week? But what can I grow? What can I stretch? And what can I store for a long haul that nobody can predict? The government had already printed 50 million ration books before the war started, confirmed by the Wikipedia article on feeding Britain in the Second World War. Women who understood that signal started preparing their kitchen strategies months ahead of the crowd, bottling fruit from summer gardens, sealed apples, plums, and gooseberries in jars, preserving runner beans in salt layers, turning the year's blackcurrant crop and raspberries into jams, while sugar could still be bought without a coupon. Every woman who stocked her shelves in autumn 1939 bought herself months of extra resilience when everything tightened the following January. Fresh vegetables and fruit would never be rationed throughout the entire war, a decision that shaped wartime cooking more than any other single policy. Cabbage, swede, parsnip, turnip, carrot, potato, leek, all shifted from background ingredients into the absolute center of every meal in the country. Nobody had chosen to love them before the war. That changed when they were the only things guaranteed in any quantity, and the women who learned to cook them well carried those dishes forward for the rest of their lives. January 1940, bacon, butter, sugar, and the kitchen fights back. January 8, 1940. That date lives in the memory of every British woman who cooked through it, confirmed by the Imperial War Museum's rationing records. The government announced food rationing, and overnight, the arithmetic of the kitchen changed completely. Bacon arrived first on the list, then butter, then sugar, and the weekly allocations were not generous by any standard. Butter landed at 4 ounces per person per week, roughly the size of a small bar of soap. Tea joined the list on July 8, 1940, at 2 ounces per week. Jam, marmalade, syrup, and treacle were added on March 17, 1941, at 8 ounces per month. Sweets and chocolates joined on July 26, 1942, at 8 ounces per 4 weeks, according to Sarah Sunden's verified research into Ministry of Food records. What nobody expected was how fast grandmothers adapted by building an entirely new cooking logic around the gaps. With the fat allocation so thin, the dripping from a Sunday piece of mutton went directly into a ceramic bowl beside the stove, and that dripping covered every task needing fat for the rest of the week. Carrot stepped in as a sweetener when sugar ran short, grated raw into pudding batter or biscuit dough. The Ministry of Food actively promoted carrot cookies, carrot pudding, and carrot fudge in leaflets distributed to every household, alongside the cartoon characters Dr. Carrot and Potato Pete created to encourage children to eat the vegetables filling their plates. Offal, meaning liver, kidneys, heart, and tripe, carried 0 ration points throughout the entire war. A beef heart slow-cooked for 3 hours with onions, swede, and carrots fed a family of 4 without touching the weekly meat allocation. Rabbit, also unrationed, went into stews with parsley, thyme, and an apple stirred into the stock to soften the gamey flavor. Root vegetable soups built around parsnip, leek, celery, and carrot, thickened with oatmeal and finished with the thin milk allowance, produced nourishing meals from almost nothing. The vegetable water was never discarded, becoming the base of tomorrow's gravy, because pouring away the water carrots boiled meant losing vitamins the family could not afford to waste. Bread pudding from soaked stale bread, dried fruit, and reconstituted dried egg, baked until the outside caramelized. Beans on toast, with haricot beans spread thick on the national loaf, requiring no ration points at all. The kitchen fought back with every unrationed ingredient it could find, and the women running those kitchens became genuinely skilled at cooking with almost nothing. January 1942, America joins in. FDR signs the Control Act. America watched Britain ration for more than 2 years from a comfortable distance, and Pearl Harbor closed that distance completely on December 7, 1941. Within weeks, the United States started building its own rationing system from scratch. Tires went first in January 1942 because Japan had seized the rubber plantations across Southeast Asia and cut off 90% of America's raw rubber supply, confirmed by multiple historical records. Cars, gasoline, and bicycles followed within months. On January 30th, 1942, Roosevelt signed the Emergency Price Control Act, creating the Office of Price Administration and the legal foundation for everything that followed. By the spring of 1942, canned goods, condensed milk, and processed foods were coming under control. In March 1943, fresh meat, butter, lard, and all edible fats went onto the ration list simultaneously, according to verified historical records of American rationing policy. The American kitchen responded immediately and practically. Wacky Cake, also known as War Cake, appeared everywhere. Mixed directly in the pan it baked in, it required no eggs, no milk, and no butter. Cocoa powder, white vinegar, baking soda, and water with a little vegetable shortening produced something moist and edible at almost no ration cost. Oatmeal Brown Betty used stale bread, rolled oats, fresh apples, and molasses in place of rationed sugar, baked until the top went golden and the kitchen filled with warmth. Dried beans, lentils, and split peas became Central American ingredients in ways they never had been before. Slow cooked with tinned tomatoes and garden herbs across 2 or 3 meals from a single pot. Cornbread muffins replaced a significant portion of rationed wheat flour with cornmeal, a surplus crop the government actively encouraged. Cornbread, corn pudding, and corn fritters appeared in wartime pamphlets with enthusiasm they had never commanded in peacetime. May 1942. The U.S. Sugar Book and what it changed in American kitchens. On May 4, 1942, more than 100,000 school teachers, PTA volunteers, and community groups distributed War Ration Book No. 1 to American civilians, according to historical records of American wartime rationing. It became known immediately as the Sugar Book because sugar was the first food it controlled. All sugar sales stopped on April 27th, resumed on May 5th, and each American now received 8 ounces per week, roughly half of pre-war consumption. The kitchen consequences were immediate. Sugar had been in almost everything American women baked. Apple pie, peach pie, cherry pie, pumpkin pie, all required sugar in the filling and often the pastry too. The response was swift. Honey pumpkin pie replaced sugar entirely with honey and evaporated milk, producing a richer filling than the original. Molasses apple crumble replaced butter-based pastry with rolled oats, whole wheat flour, and margarine sweetened with molasses, baked until the oats toasted and the apples went soft underneath. Seasonal fruits needing no imported sugar became daily kitchen staples. Strawberries eaten fresh from Victory Gardens, peaches canned at home in weak syrup from the sugar ration, blueberries folded into oat-based biscuits. Applesauce cake eliminated nearly all the sugar ration by combining molasses and unsweetened applesauce, producing a moist, spiced loaf with raisins that kept well for days. Ice box cake, built from chocolate wafer cookies and whipped cream stacked in layers and refrigerated overnight, became popular because it required no baking and used little of any ration item while still passing as a celebration dessert. Victory cake, published in newspapers including the Winston-Salem Sentinel in July 1945, used corn syrup and separated eggs to replace most ration sugar. Molasses, corn syrup, maple syrup, and honey stopped being backup options and became the first things American grandmothers reached for in any recipe, a habit many kept long after sugar came off the ration. 1943. Victory Gardens peak, and Britain invents new dishes. By 1943, the growing effort on both sides of the Atlantic had reached a scale nobody predicted at the start. In the United States, 18 million Victory Gardens spread across the country. USDA data from that year confirmed that 42% of all vegetables consumed in America came from those gardens, and the total harvest reached 10 billion pounds, a figure Roosevelt cited personally in a fireside chat. In Britain, allotments had roughly doubled from 815,000 in 1939 to around 1.4 million, with 5 million private gardens also producing food, according to Wikipedia's rationing records. Woolton Pie became the most famous dish of the entire wartime era. First published in an April 1941 article in the Times, it was created by François Latry, the head chef at the Savoy Hotel in London, and named after Frederick Marquis, Lord Woolton, Minister of Food from 1940. According to Wikipedia's Woolton Pie article. The filling combined 1 pound each of diced potatoes, cauliflower, carrots, and swede with spring onions, rolled oats, and vegetable extract, simmered in just enough water to cover, then topped with wholemeal pastry or mashed potato, and served with vegetable gravy. Food historian Professor John Fuller later noted that these wartime austerity dishes were forgotten as quickly as possible when conditions returned to normal. What people cooked with genuine enthusiasm were the dishes built from their allotments. Leek and potato soup from vegetable water thickened with oatmeal, stuffed marrow filled with a breadcrumb, and spring onion mixture baked until the skin softened. Curried carrots simmered with raisins and dried coconut, which Imperial War Museum records confirm appeared in Ministry of Food leaflets. Stewed plums sweetened with the summer sugar ration increase, which the government doubled in July 1941 to encourage people to put up their own preserves, gooseberry jam and blackberry and apple jam put up in summer for the winter months, mock marzipan from boiled haricot beans, almond essence, and spare sugar. mock crab from grated cheese and breadcrumbs blended with dry mustard, a Ministry of Food sandwich filling. One dish that survived long after the war was carrot cake itself. Wikipedia's Woolton Pie article confirms that while carrot cake was not invented during the war, it was popularized in the United Kingdom, then because it used the widely available root vegetable in place of some of the scarce flour, fat, and sugar found in other cakes. The treat, now served in coffee shops, started as a wartime solution to 3 simultaneous shortages. May 1945, VE Day celebrations, then the rations got worse. May 8, 1945. Germany surrendered, and Britain celebrated with a depth of emotion hard to put into words after nearly 6 years of war. Street parties, dancing, bonfires in the parks. And then, on May 27, 1945, 27 days after VE Day, the government made an announcement that captured the brutal reality of post-war Britain in a single bulletin. Bacon dropped from 4 ounces to 3. Cooking fat fell from 2 ounces to 1, confirmed by Wikipedia's rationing timeline and the Museum Crush article on Ministry of Food records. Part of the weekly meat allowance had to come from corned beef. The Daily Telegraph reported households would be grossly hampered in making food items that included pastry, which was accurate given that pastry needs fat and fat had just been halved. Britain had won the war. The government marked that occasion by making dinner harder to cook. Women who had managed 6 years of constraint were now working with tighter constraint and no clear end in sight. Corned beef hash with diced potatoes stretched a tin across 2 meals. Potato cakes fried in the last scraping of dripping from leftover mashed potato, flour, and salt became a breakfast staple. Oat porridge, costing no ration points, appeared on tables where it had never featured before. In the United States, the picture moved in the opposite direction entirely. Most rationing ended in August 1945, following Japan's surrender, with meat, fish, fats, and oils coming off the controlled list across the late summer months. Sugar held on the American list the longest, with some areas not fully derationed until 1947, but for American grandmothers, the post-war years brought a comparatively rapid return to abundance. 3 years of constraint ended. The recipes built under it, the molasses cakes and bean soups and oat-top crumbles, many survived in handwritten recipe boxes long after the restrictions that created them disappeared. 1946, Britain rations bread, something that never happened in the war. On July 21, 1946, the Labor government did something that had not happened even at the worst moments of the actual war. Bread rationing began. The one staple Churchill had deliberately protected throughout the entire conflict was now controlled in the first year of peace. The British Housewives' League organized a meeting at Central Hall in Westminster and passed a resolution demanding the policy be abandoned. Their founder, Mrs. Irene Lovelock, stated plainly that women had accepted smaller loaves, darker loaves, and gray loaves without complaint, and they would not accept ration loaves. An editorial in The Spectator in early July 1946 called the prospective decision a lamentable expedient. Women who had cooked around this loaf for 6 years now cooked around it on a coupon. Potato bread mixed mashed potato into the dough, reducing the amount of flour needed per loaf. Homemade oat scones used rolled oats to replace a portion of the flour ration, served with a scraping of jam from the monthly allowance. What makes the timing strange is a detail researcher, Ina Zwiniger-Bargielowska, later documented. Britain had secured a guaranteed wheat supply from Canada under a 4-year contract signed on July 24, 1946, 3 days after bread rationing started. Bread rationing ended in July 1948, shortly after the Marshall Plan Agreement with America concluded. The women cooking under it experienced one straightforward reality. The bread that had been free throughout 6 years of actual war was now rationed in peacetime, and it was still gray. 1954. Britain's last ration book closes after 14 years. July 4th, 1954. 14 years after rationing began on January 8, 1940, meat came off the controlled list and the ration book era in Britain officially closed. Meat was the last item derationed, confirmed by the Imperial War Museum's records. The Times reported that Christmas, with descriptions of shop windows filled with food in scenes the paper called almost Dickensian, because the abundance looked theatrical against 14 years of measured, counted, allocated eating. Think about that span. A child born when rationing started in January 1940 was entering secondary school when it ended in 1954. An entire generation grew up with no kitchen reference point for abundance, no experience of buying what they wanted without checking a coupon. The health records from those 14 years produced the finding nobody had predicted at the start. According to the World History Encyclopedia article on rationing in wartime Britain, drawing on historian I.C.B. Deer's research, overall there is no doubt that in terms of essential vitamins and calories, the UK's population was better fed in wartime than before, when malnutrition had accompanied unemployment and low wages. Infant mortality declined, life expectancy rose, excluding deaths from hostilities. The controlled diet delivered better nutrition than the peacetime market had managed, because the peacetime market had left large parts of the working class eating heavily white bread, animal fat, and very little fresh produce before the war. The recipe cards from those 14 years tell a story nobody commissioned. Carrot cake existed because carrots were unrationed and sweet. Rabbit stew existed because rabbit carried no ration points. Sheep's heart pie fed a whole family from offal that cost nothing in the allocation. Treacle tart from golden syrup and stale breadcrumbs in thin pastry. Condensed milk cake from the Ministry of Food's own published leaflet. Vinegar cake, a fruit cake using bicarbonate of soda and vinegar as raising agents, in place of rationed eggs, light in texture and genuinely edible despite its name. Every one of those dishes was a solution to a specific daily constraint, and every one of them survived on family dinner tables long after the constraint that created them disappeared. The women who cooked them every day for 14 years fed their families through the longest sustained food restriction in British history, not with public recognition, but with daily calculations made at the stove, using what they had, growing what they could, wasting nothing, and putting dinner on the table every single night until the last ration book finally closed. That was what the ration book meant in a real kitchen. Not a policy. Dinner, 14 years of cooking with almost nothing, and they still built a food culture that lasted forever. If this story stayed with you, the next one on your screen right now is just as gripping.